To be continued. Bear with me, I'm using something that, don't have space. Mrs. Crownover, who was most offended by it, and so one day I get a report card, I have a D- in a reading class, which was what she taught, right? And my mom freaked out because reading was like the one thing I could do, right? If it was a math class, she would have totally not even blinked. She'd have been like, well, at least you didn't fail, Good for you, you got it up from the F last time, But in this particular case, I've been reading since I was like 2.5, right? So she sort of freaks out. She schedules a parent-teacher conference. She goes to talk to Miss Crownover. And within about 30-45 seconds, she realizes that grade had nothing to do with my actual effort, let alone my attitude, let alone my ability to read. It had to do with my social circle, because Miss Crownover looks at my mom within the first minute of the meeting and says, any white parent that would send their kids to public school in this day and age, meaning an integrated day and age, obviously isn't fit to be a parent. They've lost their mind. This, by the way, is not what you want to say to my mother. So within a day or two, she organized with some other parents, and within 2 or 3 or 4 days, she had very directly and unceremoniously made sure that Mrs. Crownover was relieved of her income and her professional duties from there on out. She was forced into early retirement, as she should have been. So good for my mom. On the one hand, that's great. We got rid of the bigot. But remember, I told you it wasn't about individual bigots. It was about systems. And so here's the problem. Even as my mother took action, as she should have, to remove this racist from the classroom where she had no business teaching, right? But the problem was that after Miss Crownover was gone, I went back into a school system that every day, in a very subtle but pernicious way, was sending the same kind of message that Mrs. Crownover was trying to send, which is white students are better, black students are lesser, and they shouldn't be together. How was the system sending that message? Very easy. By putting almost all the white kids in the honors and the advanced level classes, no matter what kind of students we were. I was a lousy student. I wasn't a good student till like last week. I literally got my shit together like Tuesday of last week, right? I wasn't a good student, but I was always in the honors track, and the black kids, no matter how bright they were almost always in the standard or the remedial level track and never moved up no matter how well they did. So the system was sending a message by dividing us and saying that it was division based on ability, but it wasn't. They were sending the message that Crownover was sending. They didn't even need her there to send it, you see, and my mother never saw that. And I never saw that. It went right over our heads. And that's not just a 1979 story. That continues to happen today. Right now in this country, students of color are half as likely to be placed in advanced placement and honors classes compared to white students. Students of color are half as likely to be taught by the most experienced teachers. White students twice as likely to have the most experienced teachers. Right? Black and Latino students 2, 3, even 4 times more likely to be suspended or expelled, even though they do not break the rules more often than white students. That's the belief, but it's not true. There have been 14 different studies. They all find the same thing, that the rates of serious school rule infractions are virtually identical across racial lines. People bringing drugs to campus, equally across racial lines. People bringing weapons to campus, actually white men more likely to bring guns and knives to campus in K-12 schools than black men or Latino men. Contrary to popular belief, but that's what the Centers for Disease Control research says. But who is it that's getting caught? It's black kids and Latino kids. They're the ones getting searched. They're the ones getting detected. They're the ones getting suspended and often prosecuted. Whereas white students are doing the same thing, doing drugs just as much, bringing weapons just as often, if not more so, and escaping notice. So that's still happening. That's a system, and it doesn't require one overt racist in the classroom for that to continue, right? So that becomes a problem. We have to do more than just look at the individual. We have to look at the way that structures operate, sometimes without us even realizing it's happening. Because if we don't do that, we can get rid of every individual bigoted cop or every individual bigoted teacher or any individual bigoted employer. We can sue them, I guess, in court, and maybe people can even win those lawsuits, but what does that really change unless we take aim at those institutional policies that keep recreating inequality? The third piece, our unwillingness to see how history affects the present, how the past and the present mix. We really don't like this. We really don't want to talk about this. And when I say we, I mean those of us called white especially. There are people of color who don't necessarily always want to... It's about to get deep. Engage it either, but especially those of us called white will say things like this when people of color bring up racism. Will say, well, why can't you just get over it? You know, all of that slavery stuff was a long time ago. In fact, Louis C.K. has this really funny bit, right, where he jokes about how white people have just moved the date of slavery further and further and further back. Like it used to be, slavery was 100 years ago because it was, and then it was, slavery was 125 years ago because it was, and now it should be slavery was 150 years ago, but we'll actually say things like that was hundreds and hundreds, that was like 1,000 years ago, where we've had slavery for 500 years. When in fact it's very much within the lifetime of people in this room's great-great-grandparents, even sometimes great-grandparents. And in fact, de facto slavery extended well past the Emancipation Proclamation. There were people of color being sent back into virtual enslavement all throughout the first 30 years of the 20th century, being made to work in the mines in places like Birmingham, coal mines there and elsewhere, going back to the very plantations from which their grandparents and great-grandparents had been emancipated as sharecroppers, as tenant labor, tenant farmers, right? So in fact, slavery isn't that long ago. Segregation certainly isn't that long ago. But here's the point. We don't want to talk about it. And this is really funny that we want to tell black and brown folks to get over the past, because frankly, those of us who are white, we love the past. Absolutely flippin' love the past. How do I know that? Because some of us clearly want to go back to it. How do I know that? Because the Tea Party was a thing. And during that period, when the Tea Party was a thing, you had a bunch of white folks go into rallies dressed in Revolutionary War costumes, carrying muskets and wearing powdered wigs. Okay, here's the thing. If you dress up in a Revolutionary War costume with a musket and a powdered wig, calling yourself the Tea Party, which I think is a really old-ass reference, you are in no position to lecture black people about getting over the past. That's all, right? Because by definition, you're still rocking like 1774. You got me? Right? But even now, right, we say things like, what is July 4th? Other than a reference to the past. Like, why do we still celebrate that? Independence Day. We broke away from the British a long ass time ago last Friday. So why do we still set off fireworks every July 4th, right? I dare you to go up next Independence Day to like the most patriotic guy on the routes. You know, with the red, white, and blue wardrobe, because that's an awesome wardrobe palette, devout, and like a big I Heart the USA button on his hat, like flying a flag, blaring Lee Greenwood from the back of a pickup truck. I dare you to go up to that guy, tap him on the shoulder and say, yeah, this is all really nice, this is great, but when are you going to get over it? Hope you have running shoes on, because he's going to chase you. Although he'll probably have had enough, slices of mom's apple pie that he won't be able to catch you. But my point being, we love the past as long as it makes us feel good about ourselves, right? When a current presidential candidate says he wants to make America great again, it's a reference to the past, right? It's a reference that says we want to go back to when things were great. But only great for certain people, because the time that's being remembered so fondly wasn't so great for everyone. Right? So we love the past as long as it venerates us. We just don't want to deal with the ugly, but that's not how history works. You got to deal with the good and the bad and everything in between, right? And we know that, don't we? Like on a personal level, we know, like, put aside politics and race, just like you as individuals, right? We all come from families that are jacked up in one way or another, right? We all have dysfunction. We all have really messed up stuff in our families, some of which we talk about, a lot of which we never talk about, right? And the fact is, if you ever want, just as an individual, to move past your past, you have to confront it. That's what I do, whether that's with friends or a lover or a spouse or a partner, whatever it is, you've